My name's TJ Sharpe, so I'm going to spend the next 25 minutes or so giving you a real-life example of why what you do is important and how it actually does make a difference to patients, someone like me. I'm also going to stand here sort of metaphorically speaking because I'm one of you, and there's a good chance one day you're going to be one of me. The cliche that mentioned earlier, we're all patients, is going to be true, and someone that you love or yourself will one day be in the shoes of having to decide what treatment you should take, what clinical trial you might consider, and how you want to get to live a better or longer or healthier life. This is what my story is about. That's my wife, Jennifer, daughter, Josie, and at the time, newborn son, Tommy. This is in 2012. The story doesn't quite start there. It actually starts 12 years before that. When I walked in the dermatologist, I had a spot on my chest, and I walked in there for a rash on my foot, and I said, can you take this spot off my chest, because my mom's really giving me a hard time about it, and I just want to shut her up. And he called me back 2 days later and said, you need to go to NYU Medical Center, and don't believe everything you read on the internet about melanoma. So as soon as I got home and got done Googling melanoma, I realized that I had just become a 25-year-old cancer patient. Fortunately, we had surgery. I thought, all right, I kind of dodged a bullet on that one. And I went on with my life. I was an IT project manager. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. And I did a few things that any melanoma patient would do. I wore sunscreen, big floppy hats, long sleeve shirts, and I moved to Florida, which is where I met Jen. And this is us in July of 2012. We look pretty happy there. Everyone looks healthy. About 4 weeks after this picture was taken, or these pictures were taken, I went in the hospital with what I thought was a spiking fever. The ER doctor took some blood work, did an x-ray, and said, with these spots on your lungs and your history of melanoma, I think you have a recurrence of your cancer. I said, Doc, I got a 4-week-old kid. You must have switched my charts with somebody else. Unfortunately, he was right, as most doctors are. I was admitted to the hospital and left 16 days later with one 8-centimeter tumor removed from my small bowel and 4 other tumors spread across my lungs, my liver, and my spleen. When I left that hospital, I had a few things. First thing I had was a stage 4 melanoma diagnosis. You've heard probably a lot about the melanoma drugs that have been in the news, anti-CTLA-4 and anti-PD-1, the drugs that are changing the way immunotherapy is viewed. In 2012, chemotherapy was still a standard of care. So when I left there, I had a couple other things. I had a purpose, and I had some goals. My purpose wasn't to be a cancer survivor. It was to be a father, to be a husband, to be a son, a brother, an uncle, a part of my community. And to do that, being the project manager that I am, I was like, all right, well, we need to set goals. I need to give myself the chance of getting a durable response. I want to find the best treatment for me that's going to give me a chance to watch my family grow up. Unfortunately, along the way, we found that there was a few hurdles to getting that done. And I'd ask what you would do if you were in my shoes, or if someone you loved was given a diagnosis like this. And maybe more importantly, what would you want someone who works in this field, in the medical research and clinical trial industry, what would you want them to be doing? We had to find a trial that would give me a chance to have that response. We had to remove the barriers to start that trial and to get the right treatment for me. And then we actually had to get access to the trial or the correct drugs. And these 3 things I've seen plenty of other patients encounter as hurdles, and not all of them are here to tell you their story. When I left the hospital, we went to the oncologist's office. He was a general oncologist at a general hospital, didn't have a ton of clinical trial experience. And we walked in and he he gave me my tumor report and my different mutation types and said, all right, well, you're not eligible for targeted therapies. Here's your standard of care chemo. Now, I had just spent 16 days in the hospital, which I continued to Google melanoma, and I knew what the response rates were for chemotherapy, that the median lifespan for someone with my disease on standard of care was about 18 months, and that 9 out of 10 people would be dead in 5 years. I had a 2-year-old daughter and a 4-week-old son. That wasn't going to be acceptable. Now, my wife, who didn't have the time to Google melanoma because she had a husband in the cancer center, a 2-year-old, and an infant, and her in-laws down from New Jersey, she asked the doctor, well, what are we looking at here, doc? And he very bluntly and somewhat accurately said, I'll be surprised if your husband's going to be here in 2 years. I said, okay. All right, well, there's my first goal. I'm going to make it here for 2 years and a day, whether you like it or not. And every year he still gets a Christmas card from me saying, hey, I'm still here. That 2 years, we bypassed that. So we left that office and said, okay, that's not acceptable. We're not going to sit here and take someone's diagnosis as my death sentence. And so we did 4 second opinions. We finally found someone who would offer me a clinical trial. And he gave me a choice. He's a very well-known melanoma researcher at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa. It's about 4 hours from our house in Fort Lauderdale. Gave me a choice. He said, we could either do option A, which is one of the anti-PD-1 drug trials, or there's a second option that's a couple different immunotherapies sequenced together, including a process called TIL, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, where a tumor gets pulled out of you and you find the best T cells and they get reinfused, very similar to the CAR T cell therapies that are just been approved. I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. That's like Jetsons type medicine. Let's give that one a shot. By the way, how have other patients done on this? And he looked at me and said, well, as far as we know, you'll be the first person to try it. Okay? So you're telling me that no one has ever failed this before. Let's give it a shot. I don't know how many patients would have that attitude. I don't know how many patients would have done 4 different second opinions. I know that when I did that, I was giving myself the best chance to fulfill those goals and that purpose. But clinical trials aren't successful if patients can't find them. And conversely, patients can't make the best decision for their treatment if they don't know all their treatment options, which include clinical trials. We left that office and said, okay, we're ready to start this trial. We actually moved our family over to Tampa, and the doctor said, okay, the medicine's here. We can't wait for the trial to start. There's just one little problem. Nothing big. Contract, we have a couple different sponsors. There's a foundation involved. Contract's just being finished, and we're going to have to wait for that to get signed. I said, okay. So we waited. We waited a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and finally I had to call him and say, what's going on? Well, it's out of my hands. I'm sorry, Mr. Sharpe, but we're just still waiting, and your disease is progressing. I think it's time you consider Plan B. Wait a minute, Doc. We just had a conversation a month ago that you told me that if you were 37 and you wanted to watch your family grow up, that this is what you would do. And now, because a piece of paper is sitting on someone's desk without a signature, that I might not get a chance to watch this little boy go to college or walk this little girl down the aisle because a piece of paper isn't signed. He said, I'm sorry, nothing I can do. Okay. So I got off the phone and went on LinkedIn and found a few people that I knew that worked at the pharma companies that were involved. And I said, hey, can you go down and talk to somebody in your legal department and find out where this contract is I said, yeah, well, we'll try to get on that. And I'm a little pushy sometimes, so I said, you know what, that's probably not good enough. Let me call them myself. And I picked up the phone and got on the 800 number of one of the pharma companies involved and said, hi, I'm a cancer patient and I have a concern about one of your clinical trial drugs. And that there is the best way to get to the legal department of any pharma company in America. Right across. The woman who answered the phone there was really helpful. Well, she was really nice, and she was really trying to be helpful. And she told me that the document wasn't finished processing. And so I did this for a bunch of doctors once. They didn't get the joke. So I kind of gave her an earful about what I thought of her process. And I said, to you, this is a document, but to me, it's my life. And I'm not going to wait around while someone okays a piece of paper, while they finish something on their to-do list. A couple days later, I got a call from my oncologist and said, I don't know what you did, but we just got a call to say, start the trial on Monday, get the man his medicine. The average contract in the clinical trial world, ballpark, takes about 13 weeks to execute. Anybody in here ever have a contract issue? Raise your hand, go ahead. Anybody not have a clinical? Yes, you don't have one, I know. The 8-year-old over here. In 13 weeks, this is what happens. 150,000 people die of cancer. More than that of heart disease. If you take the top 6 disease states, that's over 400,000 people that will die every time a piece of paper goes from start to finish. 400,000 people. You can't help all of them. But I bet there's a dad or a brother or an uncle with guns and papers piled high that want a chance to live a longer life or a better life or a healthier life. 13 weeks is a long time. 400,000 people is a lot of people. The next time something comes across your desk in the different parts of this clinical trial world, when you're trying to create that bridge or work with a partner or even a competitor in the industry, remember this. Because at the end, it's not about a contract being signed or an agreement put together. It's about people. It's about the lives, the families that are affected by that number. Love to tell you that's where the story ends and everything went happily ever after. But it is clinical research. And when we got into this, we knew that there was a chance that I wouldn't respond. This is January 2013, and there's 50 billion of my T cells. If you ever want to see what 50 billion T cells look like, that's what they look like in the little IV bag. And we started it, and not only was I the first person to ever try this treatment, I was the first one to ever fail this treatment. And in March of 2013, this is me. I had lost 50 pounds. I'd failed the trial. Couldn't make it through my daughter's 3rd birthday without throwing up and passing out. And I said, all right, well, we knew there was a plan B. There was a second chance. There was another opportunity. We had a backup plan. Let's give that a shot. The college said, okay. Well, hopefully when you're done your washout period, we can start you on. And, wait a minute. What do you mean hopefully? Well, the contract's not signed yet, so we're not sure. Really? Fortunately, that week, a woman from the Melanoma International Foundation called me and said, hey, you know, we want to do something about the blog that you write. By the way, how are you doing on your trial? And I said, well, this is how I'm doing. I just failed it, and now I'm about to play contract roulette with Big Pharma for the second time in 4 months. So instead of 4 weeks later, she called me back about 4 hours later and said, I found a very similar trial to the one you want to do, and it's not 4 hours from your house, it's like 4 miles from your house in Fort Lauderdale. So we made a kind of a tough decision. And I left the big cancer center with a really amazing oncologist and a great team to go to a really small center right down the street that had a trial that I could get into, that was open, that had a contract signed. And in April of 2013, that's me on my first dose of what was then known as MK3475. You now may have heard of the drug Keytruda. It's kind of hard to avoid the anti-PD-1 drugs these days. I'm still on the second ever trial for Keytruda. This past summer, we did scans. And for the first time in 4.5 years, somebody told me that they didn't think I had cancer. I don't know if this moment happens, if I don't remove those barriers, if I don't get extremely lucky in having the support that I did to remove those barriers, if I don't navigate this system and its complexities and just get a chance to get the right drug at the right time for the right person. Find a trial. Start the trial. Get the patient their drug or the right treatment for them. These seem pretty basic concepts, and yet how many patients don't get the treatment they need, don't get a chance to be on a trial because it's closed? They don't meet the exclusion criteria. They can't find a doctor who will give them the treatment. They can't make it there because they have too many other obligations in their life, and we can't bring a trial to them. I was able to bridge those gaps. I can tell you that many others can't, or won't do that. And they deserve a chance to live just like I did. So now that all this has changed in my life, I can do a few things that help inspire others or help create the change that I want, that I created for myself for others. The first thing that I did was my best friend said, when you're done with this, we're going to do a Tough Mudder. If any of you guys have done one of these things, it's you run, crawl, and climb over things for about 12 miles, and at the end they give you a beer. So I said, I was sitting in the hospital, I go, that's a pretty audacious goal right there, considering I can't even get out of bed. But 2.5 years into my treatment, we finished one. And there's us at the finish line. The most fun part about it was he called me a couple days before and said, hey, did you read, or did you sign the consent form? I said, yeah, I signed the consent form. Why? Did you read it? I said, no. Why? You read those things? I said, well, you need to consult with your doctor if you have a serious illness before doing this. I said, yeah, that's just paperwork. Don't worry about that. The other goal that I had, my dad was a very big fan of setting goals. Put your goals up and read them every morning. And one I had since I was a kid was to do a triathlon. And I thought I'd be swimming from island to island in Hawaii, and you see me on ESPN, late at night coming to the finish line. It didn't quite happen that way. But last year, or 2 years ago now, I guess, I did my first triathlon in Fort Lauderdale Beach. And the best part about that wasn't that I finished. Well, that was a good part too. But the best part was that at the finish line, I met with this guy. That's the ER doctor who admitted me the first time. And we had set a goal as I started getting treatment that I'm going to get better. He's become a friend. His kids are my kids' age. Training partner when I occasionally get out there to train. And we had set that. It was a goal. And it was one of those things that I wanted to achieve, not because I wanted to run 3.5 miles, but because I wanted to do something and be a part of showing others that you can get better too. You can still live your life even with a serious diagnosis. When I was diagnosed, we live in Fort Lauderdale, so it's a few hours from Disney World. We bought the season pass to Disney. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I have a purpose of being a dad. And we're going to take our kids to Disney World whether I have cancer or not. And we did. And you saw Tommy when he was born. Well, this is his first ride on Space Mountain. And you guys remember taking your kids on Space Mountain or going on Space Mountain for the first time? He kind of had to get up a little bit just to get high enough for the 42 inches. And he could have done that with anybody. And he would have done that. But I had that goal of bringing my family. I had that purpose of being a dad. And now he'll always have that memory of Dad bringing him to Disney World, taking him on Space, because he loves roller coasters, taking him on Space Mountain. The one goal I didn't have was to coach 4-year-old soccer. And I don't know how many people put that in their goals list. I know it was never on mine. Until one day someone told me I wasn't going to be around to do it. So Thursday nights are my favorite night of the week, because I go from one kid's practice to the other with a bag of cones and soccer balls and get a chance to be that father, to be the coach, to make an impact on someone else's life. I also still write. I get to speak about my experience and share it to hopefully inspire some others in the industry to continue working, because there is this real life end of what you do. There is someone at the end of it. I get a chance to work in the industry with a couple of different pharma companies, with Transcelerate as a patient advisor. I bring a patient advisor or ambassador or a educated patient voice to the clinical trial and drug development world. Not just as someone who's been there, but someone who brings all the patient stories as best I can into that environment, so that the people that are working really, really hard and that are heads down, much like you guys, they get to hear a patient, someone who's been through this, someone who listens to others and brings their voices too. And I throw this up because a patients as partners is a term that's thrown around. And when you look at that, the definition of a partner, is someone who is an undertaking with others, especially a business with shared risks and profits. And you can kind of interpret that a few ways. And I would say that my risks and profits are probably a little different than some of the pharma companies, but yet we still want the same goals. So there is a shared risk there that I take and benefit that I get. And Greg mentioned it well about giving the best experience. When you go to Amazon or Netflix, they know what you want, whether you like it or not. You heard some of the technology talks yesterday. You know that the technology is there to know everything about a person. Because I know if I go on Amazon, I can see, oh, all right, my wife bought this, 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 and this, and that's what else she wants. And yet if we go to the doctor, most of them don't know what else is going on in your life. They don't know what things you've been doing with your health. I think that sort of has to change, because watching movies and buying imported goods shouldn't be higher prioritized than someone's health. Now, usually this is where I sort of thank everybody for what you do and kind of remind you that there is a person at the end of this. But I get to end today a little differently. This drawing, well, you know what? I think I'm going to let the person who drew this come talk. So if this little girl would come up and join me, please. This is my daughter, Josie. Do you want to stay on the stage? Come on up there. And this is the first time she's heard me talk about this. So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what this picture is and why you drew it?
I drew it because my dad had cancer a couple weeks after that. So I drew it like basically him, but it was just a girl. So it was basically him, but in girl version. So I drew it because my dad had cancer a couple years ago. And I drew it when I was in kindergarten because our teacher, Miss Everett, she told us to draw something for our religion test. And so I drew me helping someone who's getting through cancer research, like giving her food, water, and medicine, basically.
Yeah. I love any picture that draws me with hair. So all these people out here, what they do every day is they make their life's work is dedicated to helping other mommies and daddies get healthy, live better. What has their work to keep my health, to keep your daddy healthy? How does that mean? How does that work for you? What do you think about that? What do you want to say to them?
Thank you for helping my dad get better. I thought that he actually wouldn't be alive for any of my other birthdays, for when I have a wedding or something, for my first communion, for my graduations. I thank you for helping my dad get better. If he wasn't better, then he wouldn't be able to do all these fun stuff, like bring me to dance or have dinner with me.
What? No, you did fine. Stay right there. I don't think I could top that by saying much more. So, I love this quote. We were talking about it last night at dinner, and things do seem impossible. It might be hard to figure out how to bring all of this together and turn the clinical trial world around, turn the treatment world around. But when you do go back to work, when you do start collaborating and bridging the chasms that exist, you're not doing it for me. You're doing it for her. And all the other girls and boys out there who have daddies and mommies, grandparents, uncles, brothers and sisters who are sick. So for all those people, for all those little boys and girls, thank you guys for what you do, because you do make a difference. Thank you. Thank you guys. Good job, Josie.